I remember the moment like it was yesterday. The sky was overcast, a fitting backdrop to the storm that was brewing in my heart. I had just returned home from work, the familiar scent of rosemary and garlic wafting through the air, a scent that usually brought me comfort. But that day, it felt ominous. My wife, Claire, was in the kitchen, her back turned to me, stirring a pot. I could see the way her hair fell in soft waves down her back, the way her apron hugged her waist. I should have felt happy to be home, to have her there waiting for me, but instead, an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. "Hey honey, I'm back." I called out, trying to keep my tone light, but it came out strained. She turned, her smile brightening for a moment before faltering slightly. I noticed the way her eyes darted away from mine, as if she was hiding something. "Hi, love, how was work?" she asked, her voice cheerful but with an edge that felt rehearsed. I shrugged, trying to shake off the feeling that something was off. Later that evening, while Claire was busy preparing dinner, I decided to check my phone. I had a message from a friend, a casual check-in about a new restaurant opening in town. But as I scrolled through my notifications, something caught my eye, a text from Claire's phone number, but it wasn't from her. It was a message from someone named Jake, a name I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I opened it, my breath hitching in my throat. "Can't wait to see you again, I'll bring the wine. You know where to find me." I felt the world tilt on its axis. The room spun as I processed the words, my mind racing. A wave of nausea washed over me. I confronted Claire, my voice trembling as I asked her about Jake. The denial in her eyes was immediate, but it was the way she hesitated that told me everything I needed to know. My heart shattered in that moment, the sound echoing in my ears like a distant thunderclap. "Who is he, Claire?" I demanded, my voice a mix of desperation and heartbreak. "What's going on?" She stammered, her words tumbling over each other, but all I heard was the truth buried beneath her. Lies. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs, the late nights at work, the sudden interest in cooking classes. Everything clicked into place with a cruel clarity. I had been blind, and the realization hurt more than I could bear. As I stood there, my chest tightening with anger and betrayal, a thought crept into my mind, chilling me to the bone. I was married to a woman who had chosen to betray me with a food critic, a man who had the power to destroy restaurants with a single review. My heart raced, not just from anger but from the burgeoning seed of revenge that began to take root. I watched as Claire's face shifted from fear to guilt and then to defiance. "You don't understand, it's not what you think," she pleaded, but I couldn't hear her anymore. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. I felt like a ghost in my own home, invisible to the woman I once cherished. That night as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with images of her and this Jake together, laughing, tasting the finest dishes, sharing intimate moments that should have been ours. The pain was unbearable, but in the shadows of my heart a plan began to form, a plan that would make them both pay. I would not be the victim in this story. I would reclaim my dignity, and I would do it through the one thing I knew best, food. The thought of revenge simmered in my mind, and as sleep eluded me, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, memories of Claire flooded my mind. We had built a life together, one filled with laughter, passion, and a shared love for food. Our first date was at a quaint little Italian bistro, where we spent hours talking about everything and nothing over plates of spaghetti and garlic bread. I remember the way her eyes sparkled as she described her favorite childhood meals, and how I couldn't help but fall for her infectious enthusiasm. We complemented each other perfectly. I was the aspiring chef, always experimenting with new recipes, while Claire had an innate ability to appreciate the art of cooking. She was my muse, the one who encouraged me to pursue my dreams of opening a restaurant. We spent countless weekends visiting farmers' markets, hand-picking the freshest ingredients, and crafting elaborate dinners that would turn into spontaneous celebrations. Our kitchen was our sanctuary, a place where we created culinary masterpieces together, and every dish was a testament to our love. But as the years rolled on, cracks started to appear in our seemingly perfect marriage. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, unexpected bills, demanding jobs, and the pressures of adult responsibilities began to take their toll. I found myself working longer hours at the restaurant, pouring my heart into my career as I tried to make a name for myself. Claire, too, was busy with her job in marketing, and slowly but surely, our shared passions began to fade. Dinner conversations turned into silence, and the laughter that once filled our home was replaced by the dull hum of routine. I often wondered when it had all started to go wrong. Was it the time I missed our anniversary because I was stuck at work? Or was it the moment I realized she was spending more time at her office than with me? I tried to blame my long hours, the stress of the culinary world, but deep down I knew I had also distanced myself from her. I was so consumed with my aspirations that I failed to see the signs, her growing discontent, the way she began to retreat into herself. Then came the culinary reviews. I had always admired food critics, people who had the power to elevate or destroy a restaurant with their words. They were the gatekeepers of the culinary world, and for someone like me, their approval was gold. I was thrilled when Claire started mentioning a critic named Jake, someone who had recently gained a reputation for his sharp tongue and discerning palate. She would talk about his reviews, how he could make or break a chef's career with a single article, and I listened with half-hearted interest. Little did I know, my admiration was misplaced. Looking back, I should have sensed something was off. Claire seemed more excited than usual when she mentioned Jake, her eyes lighting up in a way they hadn't in years. I dismissed it at first, chalking it up to her fascination with food culture. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that she was hanging on his every word, eagerly seeking his approval. It was a dangerous allure, one that I had underestimated. The signs were there, the late-night phone calls, the way she would dress up for networking events, and her insistence on trying new restaurants. I convinced myself that she was just trying to further her career, but now I recognized those moments as the precursors to her betrayal. I had been so immersed in my own ambitions that I had failed to see the woman I loved slipping away. As I lay in bed, grappling with the pain of her infidelity, I couldn't help but reflect on our journey together. It was a bittersweet realization that the very thing that had brought us together, our love for food, had become the catalyst for our downfall. The thought gnawed at me. I had allowed my passion to overshadow the most important aspect of my life, my marriage. But that realization was not going to be my undoing. Instead, it fueled the fire for my revenge. I would use my culinary skills to reclaim the power that had been stripped from me. I would show Claire and Jake that their affair would not go unpunished. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to make sure that Jake's next review would be a disaster, a culinary catastrophe that would haunt him. The plan began to crystallize in my mind, each detail falling into place like the ingredients in a carefully crafted dish. Revenge, I realized, would be my new recipe, and I would serve it cold. The days following my discovery felt like a blur, a haze of anger and heartbreak. Claire went about her routine as if nothing had changed, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She would catch me starring, a multitude of emotions flickering across her face, guilt, fear, annoyance. But I remained stoic, an emotional fortress. Inside, however, I was a tempest of rage and humiliation. It was a few days later when I got my first real glimpse of the affair. I had decided to confront the truth head-on. I had been checking her social media out of a mix of curiosity and dread, and that's when I found a post that made my blood run cold. Claire had shared a picture of a beautifully plated dish at a trendy restaurant, captioned, "An unforgettable evening with good company. Cheers to new tastes. Foodie life." The tag was directed at Jake. My stomach twisted as I read the comments, filled with enthusiasm and admiration for her culinary experience. I felt the weight of betrayal settle on my chest like a stone. I couldn't stand the thought of her sharing intimate moments with him, savoring food and wine while I was left in the shadows. I was furious, and the need for revenge grew stronger. I decided to dig deeper, to uncover the full extent of their entanglement. A week later, I found my opportunity. Claire had gone out for a girls' night, but she had left her phone on the kitchen counter. I hesitated for a moment, torn between my moral compass and the insatiable need to know the truth. I picked up the phone, my heart racing as I unlocked it. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through her messages. There it was, an entire thread with Jake, filled with flirtatious banter and inside jokes that made me feel like an outsider in my own life. Can't wait for our next tasting. One message read, I'll make sure to bring the best wine just for you. I felt a hot wave of anger wash over me, and I could practically hear the laughter that echoed in my mind, the laughter of two people who had found joy in each other while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart. Then came the moment that shattered everything. I noticed a message from Jake that simply read, I miss you, let's meet soon. I slammed the phone down, the sound echoing through the empty kitchen. The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined, and I felt a surge of rage boiling within me. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we had built together? That night, I lay awake, consumed by thoughts of revenge. I began to formulate my plan, each detail becoming clearer as I envisioned the perfect way to humiliate Jake. I would take advantage of his profession, his reputation as a food critic, and turn his next dining experience into a disaster he would never forget. I started researching Jake's preferences, reading his reviews to understand what he valued in a culinary experience. He was known for his discerning palate and his penchant for the dramatic. I would use that knowledge against him. I would create a meal that would push the boundaries of culinary artistry, but in a way that would leave him bewildered and appalled. As my plan began to take shape, I couldn't shake the feeling of satisfaction that washed over me. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control of my narrative. I imagined the moment Claire would realize what I had done, the look of shock on her face when the man she had betrayed me with was served a dish that was nothing short of a culinary nightmare. The thought of it made me feel powerful. I would turn the tables on them both, and I would do it through the very thing that had once united Claire and me, food. I envisioned the dinner, the atmosphere, and the tension that would fill the room as I executed my revenge. I would make sure that Jake's next review would be one that would haunt him, a disaster that would ruin his reputation and expose the truth of his character. As I plotted and planned, I felt a sense of purpose returning to my life. The anger that had consumed me began to transform into something more manageable, a determination to reclaim my dignity. I would show Claire and Jake that their affair had consequences, and I would do it through the artistry of my craft. With each passing day, the anticipation grew. I was ready to serve my revenge, and I was determined to make it unforgettable. With my heart set on revenge, I dove into the intricacies of my plan. I needed to create an experience that would not only shock Jake, but also expose the fragility of his culinary taste. I envisioned a dinner that would be both extravagant and utterly disastrous, a meal that would leave him bewildered and my wife embarrassed. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. I started by selecting the perfect venue. I had access to our home kitchen, a place that had seen countless successful dinners and family gatherings. But this time, it would serve a different purpose. I would transform our kitchen into a stage for my revenge, where every ingredient would be meticulously chosen to create a dish that would unravel Jake's reputation as a food critic. Next, I needed to devise the menu. I knew Jake had a sophisticated palate, one that craved the finest ingredients and the most artistic presentations. My plan was to take his expectations and turn them upside down. I began brainstorming dishes that would both intrigue and horrify him. The centerpiece of my meal would be a deconstructed dish, something that looked exquisite but tasted like a culinary nightmare. I settled on a fusion dish that combined elements of fine dining with unexpected flavors. I would use ingredients that were traditionally paired with savory dishes, but twist them in a way that would confuse the senses. Imagine a delicate foam made from blue cheese and topped with candied bacon, sweet and savory, but in a way that would clash horrifically. I also thought about the presentation. I envisioned a plate that would look like a work of art, a masterpiece that would draw Jake in, only to leave him grappling with the reality of what he was tasting. I would use vibrant colors, textures, and forms to create an illusion of sophistication, all while masking the chaos that lay beneath. The next step was to invite Jake. I knew he would be keen on any culinary event, especially if it involved a new and exciting dining experience. I crafted an elaborate invitation under the guise of wanting his feedback on my latest creations. I made sure it sounded enticing, promising a night filled with culinary surprises. Join us for an exclusive tasting dinner, I wrote. I would love to have your discerning palate experience a night of unexpected flavors and culinary artistry. I signed it with a flourish, knowing that the allure of my invitation would be hard for him to resist. As the date approached, I meticulously planned every detail. I practiced my dishes, experimenting with flavors and techniques, ensuring that each component would be a perfect disaster. I even began to think about the ambience of the evening. I would set the table with my finest china, light candles, and play soft music in the background, creating an atmosphere of elegance that would contrast sharply with the chaos of the meal. The day of the dinner arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I spent the entire day preparing, ensuring that everything was in place. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me as I chopped, sautéed, and plated with precision. Each step brought me closer to my ultimate goal, revenge served on a plate. As the sun began to set, I set the table with care, adding personal touches that would make the evening feel special. I wanted Claire to feel the weight of what was happening, to understand that her actions had consequences. This dinner would not just be a meal, it would be a reckoning. When Claire arrived home, she was excited, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. She commented on the beautiful table setting, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. I forced a smile, my heart racing as I thought about the deception that awaited her and Jake. "Can't wait for you to meet Jake," she said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. I nodded, my insides churning. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. Claire's infidelity would be laid bare, and I would take control of my narrative with every disastrous bite they would take. As the clock ticked closer to the dinner hour, I felt a surge of confidence. I was ready to execute my plan, to serve my revenge cold. I would show them both that betrayal comes with a price, and I would do it through the artistry of my craft. The evening arrived, and I felt a mix of anticipation and dread as I prepared for the dinner. My heart raced as I put the finishing touches on the meal, the kitchen filled with the aroma of culinary chaos. It was time to set my plan in motion. The doorbell rang, and I felt a jolt of adrenaline surge through me. I exchanged a quick glance with Claire, who was beaming with excitement. She opened the door, and there he was, Jake, the food critic who had stolen my wife's heart. He walked in with an air of confidence, his eyes scanning the room as if he were already assessing the ambience. I forced a smile, extending my hand in greeting. "Jake, welcome. I'm glad you could make it," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He shook my hand firmly, his gaze flickering to Claire, who was practically glowing in his presence. "Thanks for having me. I've heard great things about your cooking," he replied, his tone filled with casual arrogance. I could feel the bile rising in my throat, but I kept my composure. This was just the beginning. We settled at the table, and I poured glasses of wine, the rich red liquid swirling in the crystal goblets. I watched as Claire and Jake engaged in light conversation, their laughter ringing in my ears. It felt surreal, watching the two of them interact as if I were a ghost haunting my own home. But I reminded myself of the purpose of this dinner. I was about to serve them a dish that would expose the truth of their betrayal. As the first course approached, I took a deep breath, my heart pounding with anticipation. I presented the deconstructed dish, a vibrant foam of blue cheese, garnished with candied bacon and a drizzle of balsamic reduction. The colors were striking, the presentation immaculate. I could see the curiosity in Jake's eyes as I placed the dish in front of him. "Wow, this looks incredible," he remarked, picking up his fork with enthusiasm. "I love the creativity here." I forced myself to smile, feeling a sense of satisfaction as I watched him take his first bite. His expression shifted immediately, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Claire watched expectantly, her eyes darting between Jake and me, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. "What do you think?" I asked innocently, my heart racing as he chewed. "It's interesting," he replied slowly, his brows furrowing. "The flavors are unique." I could barely contain my laughter as I watched him struggle to process the explosion of flavors that clashed in his mouth. I knew that the combination was jarring, and I relished in the discomfort that began to settle over the table. As we moved on to the second course, I served a fusion dish that was even more outrageous, a play on traditional sushi, but with ingredients that should never have been paired together. I had created a roll filled with smoked salmon, topped with a bizarre concoction of chocolate sauce and jalapenos. The look on Jake's face as he took a bite was priceless, a mixture of horror and disbelief. This is definitely bold," he stammered, trying to maintain his composure. "Bold is one way to put it," I said, a smirk creeping onto my face. Claire was oblivious, her interest in Jake overshadowing the growing tension. She was enjoying the spectacle, unaware that the evening was unraveling before her eyes. As the night progressed, I continued to serve dish after dish, each one more outrageous than the last. I watched as Jake struggled to maintain his facade of professionalism, the tension in the air thickening with each course. Claire's laughter began to wane, replaced by an uneasy silence as she sensed the discomfort creeping in. By the time I served the final dish, a dessert that was a twisted take on a classic chocolate cake, infused with hot sauce and topped with pickles, Jake could no longer hide his disdain. He took a hesitant bite and I watched in delight as his eyes widened in horror. "This is not good," he finally admitted, a hint of panic breaking through his calm exterior. Claire looked between us, her expression shifting from amusement to confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "I mean this is a culinary disaster," Jake replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "What were you thinking?" In that moment, the truth hung heavy in the air. I could see the realization dawning on Claire's face, the weight of her betrayal crashing down around her. I felt a sense of triumph swell within me, a vindication that I had longed for since discovering her infidelity. "I was thinking about what it feels like to be betrayed," I said, my voice steady as I met Claire's gaze. "I wanted to remind you both that actions have consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. Claire's face turned pale as she processed my words, her eyes darting between me and Jake. I could see the shame creeping in, the reality of her choices crashing down like a wave. Jake, realizing he had been outplayed, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Look, I didn't mean." "Save it," I interrupted. "You both have had your fun, but tonight you've tasted the bitterness of betrayal." The evening had turned into a reckoning, and I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had served my revenge, and it was as satisfying as any dish I had ever created. As Claire stared at me, her expression a mix of shock and remorse, I knew that this night would change everything. I had taken control of my narrative, and I was ready to face the consequences of my actions. The silence that enveloped the dining room felt suffocating. Claire's eyes, once filled with excitement and admiration, for Jake now brimmed with confusion and regret. I could see the realization settling in. She had not just betrayed me, she had betrayed our shared dreams, our love, and the very essence of who we were together. Jake, on the other hand, was flustered, his bravado shattered. "I didn't know you were going to," he began, but I cut him off. "Didn't know I was going to what? Expose you for the fraud you are." I spat, my voice rising. "You think you can waltz in here, charm my wife, and leave without consequences. You're just as much a part of this mess as she is." Claire looked at me, her expression shifting from shock to a mixture of guilt and anger. "This isn't fair. You can't just what? Serve you a taste of your own medicine." I shot back. "You both made your choices, and now you're experiencing the fallout." I watched as her cheeks flushed, the weight of my words bearing down on her. I had wanted this confrontation, but now that it was happening, I felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. I had crafted a meal that would haunt Jake, palate, but I had also served a dish of painful truth to Claire. As the tension hung in the air, I turned to Jake. "You're a food critic, right? You're supposed to be able to appreciate culinary artistry, but tonight you've faced something that's beyond your usual critique. You've tasted betrayal, and now you know what it feels like to be on the other side of the plate." Jake shifted in his seat, his bravado faltering. "I get it. I'm sorry, but this isn't just about me," he said, his voice softer now. "I never meant to hurt you." "It's too late for apologies," I replied coldly. "What you and Claire had was real, and it was built on lies." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Claire's eyes glistened with tears, and for a moment I felt a flicker of compassion for her. I had loved her once, and the memories of our happy moments flooded back, but they were quickly overshadowed by the betrayal she had forced upon me. Jake stood up, clearly uncomfortable with the atmosphere. "I think I should go," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't sign up for this." "Good idea," I replied, my tone icy. "You should leave, but remember this night, Jake. Remember the taste of failure, because it's nothing compared to the pain you've caused." As he grabbed his coat and moved toward the door, Claire stood up, her face a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't just kick him out like that. He didn't do anything wrong." I turned to her, my heart aching. "He didn't do anything wrong, Claire. He was the one who took advantage of your vulnerabilities. He was the one who made you forget about us. Can't you see that?" Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could keep it separate." "Separate?" I interrupted, my voice rising again. "You thought you could have both. You thought you could betray me and still keep our life intact." The door closed behind Jake, leaving just the two of us in the dimly lit room. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I felt the weight of my own emotions crashing down on me. In that moment, I realized that revenge had given me a fleeting sense of power, but it hadn't healed the wounds in my heart. Claire sank back into her chair, her sobs echoing in the silence. I felt a pang of compassion, but it was quickly overshadowed by my own pain. "What are we going to do now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, realizing that the path ahead was uncertain. "I don't know, Claire. I need time to think. This isn't just about the food or the betrayal anymore. It's about trust, and right now, I don't know if I can trust you again." The words hung in the air, a painful truth that we both had to face. I had served my revenge, but it had come at a cost. The evening had exposed the cracks in our relationship, and I knew that we were standing at a crossroads. As I cleaned up the remnants of the disastrous dinner, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. I had confronted the betrayal, but I also realized that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, wouldn't mend the broken pieces of our marriage. In the days that followed, I reflected on the night's events. Claire and I had a lot to talk about, and it wouldn't be easy. But I knew that if there was any hope of rebuilding what we had lost, it would require honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to face the truth together. Ultimately, I had served a dish of revenge, but what I truly needed was a recipe for healing. As I stepped into the kitchen one last time that night, I vowed to myself that I would find a way to reclaim my passion for cooking, not as a means of revenge, but as a way to rediscover the joy that had once brought Claire and me together. And so, I began to understand that while the taste of betrayal was bitter, the possibility of forgiveness and reconciliation was a flavor I was willing to explore. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to take the first step, one carefully crafted dish at a time. And with that thought, I closed the door on the past, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead.